At 0114, the officer staring at the air defense coordination screen watched the 7th bearing line appear. 7 directions, all drones, 420 of them, climbing out of Russian territory like a slow-moving flood. From Milarovo, Kursk, Bryansk, Oriol, Primorsko-Akhtarsk, and 2 launch points he hadn't seen active in weeks. He had 420 problems, and about a third of them were lying to him. Somewhere inside that swarm, between the real Shaheds carrying 50 to 90 kilograms of explosive and the plywood Gerberas that cost less than a used bicycle, were 140 decoys. Same radar signature, same flight profile. No way to tell which was which until one of them exploded and the other didn't. His job was to sort 420 contacts into kill and ignore, and get it right every time. The expensive stuff stayed in the holster. No Iris-T missiles on drones. No NASAMS. Those were reserved for what hadn't arrived yet. The drones went to the cheap layer. Interceptor UAVs at $5,000 apiece. Mobile fire groups and pickups with thermal sights. And the newest addition to Ukraine's air defense, helicopters. Somewhere over Odessa Oblast, a naval aviation crew was already airborne. The pilot held the helicopter at altitude while the gunner leaned into the infrared feed. A white-hot delta shape crawling across black terrain. He lined up the M134 minigun and fired. The Shahed disintegrated. Then he found the next one, and the next. 8 kills before dawn, from a helicopter that cost less than a single interceptor missile. By 0430, 374 drones were down. 46 had punched through, but the officer wasn't looking at the drone count anymore. A new line had appeared on the network feed. Strategic Aviation, airborne out of Vologda. 3 Tu-95MS bombers. Machines older than everyone in the room. They weren't carrying drones. Each one was loaded with 8 cruise missiles, and they were already at their launch line. The Tu-95MS is a contradiction that refuses to die. Designed in the early 1950s, powered by 4 counter-rotating turboprops that scream loud enough to be picked up by submarine sonar, and still, 7 decades later, the backbone of Russia's cruise missile fleet. Last spring, Ukrainian drones caught a row of them on the tarmac and burned several to scrap. The ones flying tonight were survivors, pulled back to deeper bases, rotated forward to Vologda just weeks ago. Russia was gambling irreplaceable machines because it had no other way to put 24 Kh-101s in the air at once. The missiles dropped off the wings somewhere over northern Russia and turned south. 24 cruise missiles, each one fresh from the factory. Serial numbers on a downed airframe would later show a build date 19 days before impact. From the assembly line to a bomber's pylon in under 3 weeks. That's not a weapons program. That's a conveyor belt. The Kh-101 flies low, 60 to 100 meters off the deck, hugging terrain, adjusting course with an onboard navigation system that compares the ground below to a digital elevation map. It doesn't need GPS. It doesn't care about jamming. It just reads the Earth like a road map and stays below the radar horizon until it's too late. Except tonight, it wasn't too late. The air defense commander had been watching the bombers taxi on intelligence feeds for hours. By the time the missiles crossed into Ukrainian airspace, NASAMS and Iris-T batteries had firing solutions waiting. 24 launched, 24 intercepted. Not a single Kh-101 reached its target. If you're keeping score at home, that's 24 for 24. A perfect game. The kind of stat line a pitcher retires on. But the commander wasn't celebrating. The magazine was thinner now. Every interception tonight was a missile he wouldn't have tomorrow. And from Cape Chauda on the southern tip of Crimea, 2 signatures had just appeared on the network, accelerating through Mach 5 and still climbing. These weren't cruise missiles. They didn't fly low. They didn't hug terrain. They came straight down, and they were 6 minutes from Kyiv. 2 signatures from Cape Chauda. The battery commander saw the speed readout and felt his stomach drop. Mach 5, and accelerating. These were Zircons, originally built to kill aircraft carriers, now pointed at a power substation west of Kyiv. A Zircon in cruise phase is essentially untouchable. It crosses 100 kilometers in under a minute, wrapped in superheated air that blinds most tracking radars. No interceptor on Earth can chase it down from behind. The only way to kill it is to wait. And that's the part that takes nerve. Because the Zircon has a weakness, and the weakness has a name. Terminal phase. Somewhere in the last 15 to 20 kilometers, the missile has to slow down to find its target. The scramjet that pushed it to Mach 8 can't guide it to a building. The seeker needs clean air. So the Zircon drops from Mach 8 to roughly Mach 4.5. Still 3 times faster than a rifle bullet, but slow enough for a PAC-3 to reach. The battery commander had done this math before. The engagement window was measured in single-digit seconds. Fire too early, the interceptor burns out chasing a target it can't catch. Fire too late, there's nothing left to protect. He held, watched the track close, watched the velocity start to bleed. Now, 2 PAC-3 MSE interceptors launched, hit to kill, no warhead, just a 73-kilogram projectile aimed at a point in the sky where the Zircon would be a fraction of a second later. 2 impacts, 2 kills. Russia's most expensive weapon, somewhere between $2 and $4 million per missile, turned into shrapnel over an empty field. Moscow had spent the cost of a fighter jet to hit a substation. The substation was still standing. The Zircon's track was still glowing on the screen when it faded. If you're one of those people who subscribes and hits the bell, now's a good time, because those 2 Zircons were the distraction. While every radar in western Ukraine was tilted upward, tracking hypersonic inbounds from Crimea, 11 Iskander ballistic missiles launched simultaneously from 5 different positions across western Russia. Flight time to target, under 4 minutes. There was no time to redistribute, no time to reposition. The math was about to stop working. 11 launches, 5 locations, all at once. The fire control officer watched the tracks bloom across the scope. Bryansk, 5 inbound. Voronezh, 2. Kursk, 1. Milerovo, 1. Taganrog, 1. 11 ballistic missiles on 11 different azimuths, all converging on targets scattered across 8 oblasts. This wasn't a strike. This was geometry designed to break a defense network. An Iskander-M doesn't give you time to think. It climbs on a solid fuel booster, reaches its apex, and comes back down at speeds that push past Mach 6 on the way in. Worse, it maneuvers. Short, unpredictable corrections in the terminal phase that turn a predictable arc into a jinking nightmare. 1 interceptor isn't enough. You need 2, sometimes 3 PAC-3 rounds per inbound, and he didn't have 33 missiles to spare. So he prioritized. Kyiv, the 750 substation already under cruise missile attack, got coverage. Kharkiv, 2 inbound from Voronezh, got what was available. Zaporizhia, 1 inbound, drew a battery that had rounds left. The rest, Sumy, parts of Poltava, were outside the umbrella. Not because the operators didn't see them, because they had nothing left to shoot. 4 intercepted. 7 made it through. 5 confirmed impacts across 32 locations in 8 oblasts. A gas hub in Poltava. Fire visible for kilometers. An electrical substation in Dnipropetrovsk. 20,000 consumers dark. Residential buildings in Zaporizhia. 9 wounded, including children. A shopping center hit. Secondary fires. Detonation of contents. The math that worked all night. Interceptors matched to threats, cheap counters for cheap drones, expensive rounds for expensive missiles, had finally hit a wall. When everything arrives within the same 4-minute window from 5 directions, there aren't enough batteries on Earth to cover every angle. Russia had figured this out. The ballistic wave wasn't designed to be accurate. It was designed to arrive simultaneously. But the strangest part of the night was still unfolding. Mixed in with the Iskanders, radar operators had picked up additional ballistic tracks. Familiar flight profile, familiar speed, unfamiliar designation. These missiles had serial numbers that didn't match any weapon in active Russian service. Because they weren't weapons. They were supposed to be dead. The designation came back. RM-48U. Most operators had never seen it outside a training manual, because that's exactly what it was. A training missile. Built from expired 48N6 interceptors pulled out of S-300 and S-400 systems, refurbished just enough to fly again, and originally designed to play the role of a target so Russian air defense crews could practice shooting something down. A missile built to be destroyed. Now it was pointed at a Ukrainian city. The operator stared at the track. Ballistic profile. Same speed bracket as an Iskander on a short arc. But the warhead question was the problem. Some RM-48Us carry 133 to 180 kilograms of steel fragments. Others carry nothing at all. A zombie missile. already dead on paper, resurrected just to waste your ammunition. Ukraine's intelligence directorate had counted roughly 400 of them in Russian stockpiles. Tonight was the proof they'd started spending them. The decision was binary and brutal. Engage with a $3.8 million PAC-3 and risk killing an empty shell? Or let it through and risk 180 kilograms of fragmentation hitting an apartment block? There's no third option. There's no sensor that reads a warhead through a nose cone at Mach 4. He fired. That's the math Russia wanted. It doesn't matter what the RM-48U carries. What matters is what it costs to stop. A retired training missile, essentially scrap with a motor, forcing the defender to burn through irreplaceable interceptors. The military equivalent of making someone spend $1,000 to block a $5 check. While the last fragments were still falling over central Ukraine, something else was crossing a very different kind of line. At 1750 local time, Romanian defense radars picked up a drone approaching from Ukrainian airspace, heading straight for Tulcea County. 2 F-16 scrambles from Feteshti Air Base. At 1807, a row alert notification hit every phone in northern Tulcea. The drone, a Shahed variant that had wandered off its attack corridor on the Danube ports, crossed into Romanian airspace near Sfântu Gheorghe, NATO airspace. It drifted over territorial waters and exited north of Sulina. No warhead, no casualties, no damage. But the phones had already buzzed, the jets were already in the air, and the precedent was already set, for the 12th time since the invasion began. An hour later, a second drone approached the same corridor. This time, the scramble was multinational. A German Eurofighter and a Spanish Eurofighter launched from Cogolnicianu on the Black Sea coast. NATO's Eastern Shield, activated by a plywood drone that cost less than the fuel it took to intercept it. Somewhere between the zombie missiles and the border violations, the shape of this war had quietly shifted. It wasn't about precision anymore. It was about volume, about making defense more expensive than attack, about pushing cheap threats across every boundary that mattered, physical and political. 459 targets launched, 406 destroyed, 88%. Every cruise missile, gone. Every hypersonic, gone. 4 out of 11 ballistic intercepted under conditions where the geometry made a perfect score impossible. 374 drones out of 420. By any standard in any air force on Earth, that is an extraordinary night of air defense. But 88% isn't 100. The 12% that made through hit gas infrastructure in Poltava, substations in Kiev and Dnipropetrovsk, residential blocks in Zaporizhia, an energy facility in Odessa, dozens wounded, children among them, 8 oblasts with damage reports. That's the brutal truth of volume warfare. Even a high interception rate, multiplied by a large enough attack, still produces casualties. And that was the point. Not the missiles, not the drones, the timing. This attack launched hours before American and Ukrainian negotiators sat down in Geneva. Witkoff and Kushner on one side of the table, Umerov on the other. And between them, the smoke from 32 impact sites still rising. Every crater was a message. We can do this whenever we want. Negotiate accordingly. But Moscow miscounted its own signals, because Kiev brought numbers too. 24 Kh-101s intercepted, 100%. 2 Zircons, the weapon Russia calls unstoppable, stopped dead. An air defense network built from American Patriots, European IRISTs, Norwegian NASAMS, Ukrainian interceptor drones, volunteer helicopter crews, and mobile fire teams in pickup trucks. All of it wired together into a system that didn't exist 3 years ago. That was the other message on the table in Geneva. Russia is now launching everything it has. Cruise missiles built 19 days ago, training missiles decommissioned years ago, hypersonic weapons designed for aircraft carriers, and plywood decoys designed for nothing. The entire spectrum, from cutting edge to scrap heap, in a single night. The question isn't whether Ukraine can defend against any one of them. It can. The question is whether the math of attrition, expensive interceptors against cheap threats, finite stockpiles against a production line that never sleeps, holds long enough for the diplomats to finish their coffee in Geneva. If this breakdown changed how you see the air war, hit subscribe and the bell so you don't miss the next one. Drop your country in the comments. I want to know where war horizon is reaching. And here's the question I want you to think about. What happens when Russia runs out of real missiles? Zombie stockpile is all that's left. Or does Ukraine run out of interceptors? This is War Horizon. See you on the next one.